I'm Michael.
And I'm Andy.
And on today's episode of Bobbleheads, we're going to be covering the upcoming pre-release for the Tales of Aria expansion for Flesh and Blood. And so what this video is going to cover is we're going to do kind of what we're calling a pre-release primer, right? And to get you ready for what to expect and give you a few things to think about if you plan to go to one of these events as well. And also, if you're just trying to learn about the new release that's coming out, this will be a really good way to become familiar with the heroes that are coming out and what those heroes are looking to do best. With that said,
Michael, what's a pre-release?
Hey, that's a good question, Andy. So in our first video, we talked a little bit about the perspective of like a Magic player coming into this, but we understand that not all people playing this game are coming from Magic the Gathering, and even if you are, maybe you've never been to a pre-release event before. And so what's really cool about a pre-release is that I call it super casual. Some people say least competitive, kind of depending on your perspective. But really, the end result is that anybody's welcome. You can come and just figure out how the game works. Everybody's jumping in for the first time with the cards and how they work and new mechanics that they've never really used before. And so the long story short is that learning is encouraged at pre-release events. And so if you're new or if you want to bring a friend and get them into it for the first time, pre-releases really are the best time to jump in. And so that's kind of like the spirit behind a pre-release. The actual format is you show up, they give you 6 packs, you make a 30 card minimum deck, and this format is technically called sealed because it's just 6 sealed packs that you get, and you go from there. So 30 card minimum deck, not including your equipment or your heroes. And once you've got that deck, you'll play 4 kind of casual rounds, and sometimes it's less or more depending on the event, but that's about it. 30 card deck, 4 rounds. Sometimes you'll win packs for each win or however they want to lay it out. But it's just a fun event, and it's really the first look that everybody's getting to have with the cards. So it's a good time, and I'm personally really excited for this because short of just play testing and things like this, this will be my first time playing an event in person with people that I haven't met before. So I'm really looking forward to it, and it's just always a good time to go to a pre-release. There's not much like it in games, and I like it. So with that,
we're gonna get our first XP.
That's right. Yeah. So with that said, with Tales of Aria, there's going to be 3 new heroes. Let's go ahead and just jump into the first one that you can see here. I'm pronouncing it Oldhim. I've heard it Oldhim, but I don't know. I guess we'll find out when we talk to people about it what the preference is. But why don't you give us a little bit of an intro on Oldhim?
Yeah, I haven't heard LSS weigh in on exactly how they want it to be said, so we get to kind of make it up for ourselves, and we're going with Oldhim. Yeah. Oldhim is the grandfather of Eternity if you have his old version, but for sealed we play with the young versions of the heroes. He has the essence of earth and ice, and I'll say this once for Oldhim and it applies to all the heroes. Essence means you can play with cards of those essences. So in this set there are ice cards, there are earth cards, and there are lightning cards. And Oldhim can only play the earth and the ice cards, and Guardian cards and other cards that also apply to him. But as far as the essences are concerned, he's limited to those 2. So he can't play any lightning cards, and the other heroes have one essence that they can't play.
Gotcha.
He is a Guardian hero. We'll talk a little bit more about what you can probably expect from a Guardian type hero later. I think the best way to start is let's talk about his weapon, which is Titan's Fist. Titan's Fist is a one-handed hammer. It has once per turn action. You can pay 3 resource points to attack with it. It has 3 base attack, but while there is a card with cost 3 or greater in your pitch zone, Titan's Fist has +1 attack. And we'll talk about this more later, but Guardian cards will tend to be more expensive than most other cards, so there's a decent chance that it'll be attacking for 4 for 3 resources.
Gotcha.
And with all of these heroes, they are not the first ones of their class. So this is the second Guardian hero we've had.
Okay.
And I think it's useful to kind of look back and compare this hero in that class versus the previous hero, which was Bravo.
Yeah.
He had a hammer called Anothos that also cost 3 to attack with. It attacked for 4, and then if you had, I believe it was 2 cards in the pitch zone, cost 3 or greater, it attacked for 6.
Wow.
So already the base attack was what Titan's Fist's ceiling is. So I feel like this is a little bit of a downgrade. I guess the upside is Titan's Fist is a one-handed weapon, while Anothos was a two-handed weapon. So Titan's Fist allows you to play a shield along with it. I suppose there could be other weapons that they could print that would be one-handed weapons that he could use. But so far what we've seen for this set, he can have his hammer and a shield to go with it.
Gotcha.
I really want to emphasize that this is a pretty significant downgrade from 4 base attack to 3 base attack, because that's a break point that you see a lot in Flesh and Blood in general, because a lot of the attack action cards that you see can block for 3.
Yep.
And several other cards block for 2. But unless you have a defense reaction, you're really not ever getting to block for more than 3 in one card. And so with Anothos, if you wanted to block the full amount of damage, you had to spend 2 cards to block it out. With Titan's Fist, a lot of the time you're going to be able to block it with just 1 card.
Gotcha. So that chip damage that makes a difference in close games, you don't really get to get through on a lot of that. It's just a 1-to-1 card trade for resources, and that's that. And you don't really feel like you get the effect, it sounds like.
Exactly. With Bravo, a lot of times your whole game plan was built around just, I'm going to block out with most of my hand, and I'm going to save enough resources that I can attack you back with Anothos. And you'd slowly just kind of grind them down and chip in with damage. And I'm not sure if that's going to be a really viable strategy for Oldhim.
Well, yeah, at least not with his weapon. But let's take a look at what else Oldhim is looking to do, which is hit really hard. So, as you can see here with Glacial Footsteps, which is an Elemental Guardian action. So this is the exact kind of card you'll be looking to put in an Oldhim deck. You can see right away, 10 damage, that's a lot more than the 3 or 4 that we were debating between. But like you said before, it costs 6 to play. And so expensive to play, but definitely gets you over the top of a lot of people's ability to block, short of putting down 4 cards at 3 defense each, in which case, you're way ahead of card advantage and things like that. So it's important to remember his stuff is expensive. And when you're looking to build your deck in Sealed, because, again, this is kind of the context that we want to put this in, is if you're at a pre-release event and you've got a bunch of cards in front of you and you kind of are thinking, what can I play? I've got some of these cards and some of those cards. If you're looking to play Oldhim, what you want to do is you want to look and see how many blue cards that you have. And if you can make a deck with about half of them being blue cards, which are the ones that you can pitch for 3, you might think about playing Oldhim, because that's the way that you're going to be able to get to spend 6 resource points and swing out for 10. Otherwise, it's going to be really difficult, because a lot of times if you play Oldhim without the ability to have a bunch of blue cards in hand to pitch for, you're going to have really cool cards that you're not going to be able to play. And it's going to feel really bad to block for 3 instead of attack for 10 with something like this. So his stuff is expensive, and you need to make sure that your deck that you put together is going to be able to afford the things that he wants to do.
Yeah, you can't just look at a pile of really strong Guardian cards and be like, great, I'm going Oldhim. You need to make sure you have the resource base to go with it.
Exactly, yeah. So another thing to keep in mind if you're looking to play Oldhim is that as one of the heroes with the essence of ice, he has the ability to make frostbite tokens.
Right, which is an elemental token, Aura, and it says cards and activated abilities you control cost an additional resource. At the beginning of your end phase, or when you play a card or activate an ability, destroy frostbite. So this is a token that you create, but you put it under your opponent's control so that it taxes their resources on their turn.
Gotcha. Yeah. So, and we'll get to Fuse later, but this is one of those situations where, like, if you have the ability to make an action and give them a frostbite token, it's just yet another situation where you've got card advantage. So if they're busy blocking out against siege attacks and then having these frostbite tokens to deal with later on, you really can kind of get this kind of, for lack of a better phrase, snowballing effect where the Essence of Ice cards really do build a good advantage. So with that said, that's the kind of theme behind Oldhim. But would you run me down? We have a list of top 5 commons that you're going to want to look for when you're playing Oldhim. So what does it look like to build a deck and what you can reasonably expect to get in a sealed format without short of a Majestic or a Super Rare to play around?
Sure. So as we said, Oldhim has the Essence of Ice. I think Ice is going to be really, really powerful, and you can see that I've chosen 3 Ice-specific cards to emphasize for Oldhim. Snow Under has Ice Fusion. We'll talk more about Fusion later. But basically, all of these cards, in addition to hitting really hard, have extra abilities to be able to tax your opponent, whether that's making them discard cards or I think Oldhim has an ability to wipe out a card in Arsenal. He can weaken their opponent's attacks. These 5 cards I've picked out just kind of as exemplars, as ways that Oldhim is able to hit really hard, set up for future turns. He has a number of different auras that enable you to sort of, if you have something that's really expensive, you can pay for it over 2 turns by getting an aura or an amulet or something else set up that can sort of give you a benefit down the road, and you can sort of invest in it early and then get the payoff later.
Nice.
So yeah, as we said, he hits as hard as anybody in the game, and he also has a lot of ways to give attacks dominate or to tax the opponent in some way. And I think it should be a really powerful combination.
Awesome. Well, cool. So that's the basics behind Oldhim, and I'm really looking forward to, if I can get those cards to be able to afford to do what he does, I think it'll be really awesome to see come together. Well, with that, why don't we move along to the next hero? Would you help me understand how Lexi works? And before we do that, in our last video, we covered Lexi and Oldhim a little bit. So we've talked a little bit about her, and she has the essence of Ice and Lightning, so some of these cards are going to overlap. But beyond that, why don't you introduce us to Lexi and how we can expect to play her for the pre-release event?
Sure. I'll go ahead and just read her card. She has the Essence of Ice and Lightning. She is a ranger, which means she attacks with a bow and arrow. Mm-hmm. She has the ability, once per turn action, turn a face-down card in your arsenal face up. If it's a lightning card, your next attack this turn gains go again. If it's an ice card, create a frostbite token under target hero's control, go again. So with lightning, you're able to speed up your attacks or buff them in some way. In this case, give them go again. Mm-hmm. And then with ice, you're able to interfere with your opponent, and usually in the form of frostbite tokens. I think we've mentioned this before, but with rangers, arrows are attack actions that can only be played from your arsenal. Mm-hmm. So we'll look at her bow in a second, but you have to be able to get something into arsenal and then you can attack with it. But because it's kind of finicky to set up, it usually pays you off because they're usually some of the most efficient, powerful attacks in the game. Cool.
So I'll go ahead and talk a little bit about her weapon. There's the frostbite token. Well, cool. So, but going back to Lexi's weapon, Shiver here. So this is the common weapon that you can reasonably expect to play. And it just says that you can put an arrow card from your hand face up to an empty arsenal zone that you control. And if you do, you choose one of 2 options. The first of which is to gain 1 attack until end of turn, or it can gain dominate until end of turn. So you have good options to kind of go over the top to finish the game or do whatever you need to do. And it also puts things in the arsenal. So like you said, with the ranger's abilities needing to be able to be played from the arsenal, this kind of helps her set that up. And so something to think about is that if you've played Azalea in Arcane Rising, the other ranger that came before Lexi, Shiver is a lot like Azalea's Death Dealer, where you're paying 1 resource to put an arrow face up into the arsenal. So that should be familiar for anybody who's played Azalea coming in. But instead you get this choice. So what's really cool about this is that it really looks like a good upgrade, because Lexi has enough on-hit effects that having your choice between the 2 to make it both more likely that you get a hit is most of the time going to be more valuable than the card that Azalea's Death Dealer drew from Arcane Rising.
And I'm so glad that we don't have to go back through I hated the play pattern with Death Dealer so Azalea's hero ability said that you could take a card from your arsenal, put it onto the bottom of your deck, and then you'd flip the top card of your deck into your arsenal. And if it was an arrow, it would gain Dominate. And so I would always go to a bunch of trouble setting up the top of my deck. I'd get a really strong arrow there. And then you can only use Azalea's ability if you have a card in Arsenal. So I would use Death Dealer, put a card in Arsenal, and then Shatter Pause, and then draw the card off of Death Dealer's Resolution and no longer know what the top card of my deck was and have to either shoot the arrow that I loaded with Death Dealer or just use Azalea's ability blind and completely waste all my effort trying to set up my draws. And I realize that that's my personal sequencing mistakes, but I'm glad that I will not even be tempted to have to relive some of that with Lexi.
Yeah, a lot less mental overhead just to get the sequencing right there. Cool.
One other interesting note with Shiver. So Shiver can be activated as an instant, and Azalea's Death Dealer was an action that had go again. And so in most situations, that's going to be functionally identical. But on the first turn of the game, you can actually use Shiver on your opponent's turn. So I think Lexi is probably the hero that really, really wants to go second, because obviously you can block out, get to draw back up at the end of turn. So there's not much of a cost to going second, but she can actually use some of those cards to set up her first turn, get an arrow into Arsenal, get ready to attack as soon as she's able to. So I think she'll benefit from playing second and getting to use Shiver at instant speed.
Awesome. Well, with that, now that we have like a good intro, let's talk about what Lexi likes to do. And well, there's going to be a theme here in the video that you'll see. Lexi, as a ranger, likes to deal damage. She has a ton of effects that say, if this deals damage, you get some bonus, or you get to make this decision, or the opponent has to pay some tax down the road. And so there's a lot of ways to set up situations a little easier than Azalea did before to kind of find that edge and card advantage and tempo in the game.
Yeah, and to make a fairly pedantic but also fairly important point, we're used to effects that say on hit, you get some sort of bonus, and on hit literally means you go to the damage resolution phase of the chain link resolution. If a card's attack value is greater than the defense value of the cards defending it, you deal damage equal to the excess, and that attack is said to have hit. And there's a number of other ways to deal damage that do not count as hitting, and so they don't trigger on-hit effects. But in this format, there are plenty of on-hit effects still, but there are also formats that just say whenever this deals damage. And so that would encompass a lot of those other ways of dealing damage, most notably arcane damage, which we'll get to in a minute with Briar. And there are several attacks where like maybe it deals a point of arcane damage and it's an attack. And so you could theoretically double trigger a lot of those effects if they're templated in the way that says when this deals damage instead of when this hits.
Yeah, so that'll be a good note for people when you're reading cards and you're trying to figure out what to include. Maybe think about if you see any language it's like that deals a hit, then deal an arcane damage, and use that as your trigger, and just be aware of that when you're looking to build your sealed deck. If that's something that might add just a cool play that you can set up or something like that, which is kind of what these are all about. Is a lot of the times when I'm drafting, I like to set up and look at what's this cool play that I can set up. And if I do that, I'll consider the night a success or something like that on top of how many wins I can take or whatever. But, you know, everybody has their own goals going in, but that tends to be mine, or the kind of cool plays like that. So, that's pretty cool. So with that said, we can take a look at not Briar yet. Spoiler alert.
We got to get to Lexi's top 5 commons.
You'll see, again with themes. Do you see anything similar here that we've seen before, Andy?
Yeah, I only picked ice cards for this.
Yeah.
I picked 0 lightning cards for Lexi.
And Oldhim, you know, I mean, and I know he can't, but it's just kind of funny that, you know, you've got the two people that share ice, and it's just like, well, yeah, ice is good, so just play those cards.
do ice if you can do ice.
Exactly. So
I really want to call out Chilling Ice Vein. I think this is one of Lexi's best arrows at common. It has ice fusion, and if it was fused, whenever an attack deals damage to a hero, they discard a card or pay 1 resource. So this is one of those effects that I just talked about, where if you have multiple ways of getting in damage on a single card, you can actually double trigger that effect.
Nice. Okay, that's good to keep in mind. Well, cool. So I guess finishing up the common cards for Lexi, you'll see some of the ice cards again. You'll notice that the one ranger card that shines through for Lexi specifically is going to be Overflex. Just a good buff and a reload card. It has go again. It's costs 1. It's just really good value. Looking to do
there really
aren't
a lot of ways. There aren't a lot of ways to reload in this format. There were a lot more for Azalea. And so unless you just get lucky and get to open Voltaire, which is her much more rare weapon, which allows you to use it multiple times in a turn, you're not ever going to really be able to shoot off a bunch of arrows in one turn unless you have a card like Overflex to reload.
Gotcha. So that's a pretty kind of build enabling card right there that people should look out for if you're looking or considering to build Lexi when you're putting together your sealed deck. Cool.
Shall we get to Briar?
Yeah. Okay. So the third and final hero that will be released with Tales of Aria and that you'll get a chance to look at for the pre-release this weekend is Briar. So tell us a little bit about Briar and what she's looking to do.
Yeah, so Briar's a wizard, and everybody was really excited that we were getting another wizard.
That's what
we got. We got our third Runeblade hero.
Yep.
But after the initial disappointment of another Runeblade hero, after Chain's been tearing everything up for months and months now, I really do think Briar's pretty sweet. So Briar has the essence of Earth and Lightning. She is a Runeblade hero. I'll say that very clearly. Whenever an attack action card you control deals damage to an opposing hero, create an embodiment of Earth token, and we'll look at that later. Whenever you play your second non-attack action card each turn, create an embodiment of Lightning token. So an embodiment of Earth token says your non-attack actions each defend for 1 extra defense while defending, and then at the beginning of your action phase, destroy it. So for just for 1 turn cycle, you get to defend with non-attack actions stronger than they would be able to otherwise. And you can stack these up. Can we go back to Briar?
Yeah.
So this is just whenever an attack action you control deals damage. Again, another effect where if you can deal multiple sources of damage, you can just kind of stack those up and have non-attack actions that are defending for 5 or 6 if you're lucky enough.
Yep.
So yeah, I think she's going to be really strong, and her ability to deal arcane damage, which we'll look at in a little bit, is very interesting. Let's take a look at her weapon, Rosetta Thorn.
Yep.
Every Rosetta has its thorn.
Is that a reference I don't know? Oh, no.
No, just every rose has its thorn.
Oh, no. Yeah, it's a reference I don't get. All right, well, we'll just edit that out, right? Yeah, so
that's fine.
Yeah, Michael doesn't miss references. Yeah.
Is a 2-handed sword. Once per turn action, you can pay 1 resource and attack. It attacks for 2 at its base. And then whenever you attack with Rosetta Thorn, if you've played an attack action card and a non-attack action card this turn, deal 2 arcane damage. So potentially for 1 resource, you're getting to attack with 4 on a weapon. And again, if we want to just kind of look back at Runeblade weapons that we've seen in the past, Dread Scythe was a Majestic, and it attacked for 4, which was also blended across arcane and regular damage.
Yep.
But it cost 3 resources, red resource to attack. Nebula Blade costs 2 resources to attack. It also was conditional on what other cards you had played in the turn. I think its base was 1, and then if you'd played a non-attack action, you could attack for 4 with it.
Okay.
So good, but again, that's your max is 4, and you're paying twice as many resources. So potentially, Rosetta Thorn could be the best of the just base Runeblade weapons that we've seen so far.
Yeah, it seems like if you have tempo, then and you're getting to do what you want to do, getting an attack in, setting up that attack well, then you have an extra resource sitting around, and you throw it out at the end, and all of a sudden you've got this split damage thing coming through, which is just keeping that tempo ahead. So I guess the big question is how hard it's going to be to meet this condition when you're playing. So if you've got a pretty good deck and you think you're going to be keeping tempo, this will happen often enough to win you some games. And her hero abilities already kind of make you want to balance your attacks and non-attacks as evenly as possible. So should be pretty cool. Again, like the others, when this comes together and does what it wants to do, it's going to be kind of really brutally efficient and really powerful. So I'm looking forward to that. So, well, Andy, back to the theme. What is Briar looking to do?
Briar is looking to deal arcane damage.
So again, lots of damage. And so this is especially important in this set because for the first time we have a set with arcane damage without a common cycle of equipment that interacts with that arcane damage. So with a few exceptions, this is just going to be free chip damage whenever it's played. So if you're playing against Briar, it's a good idea to try and keep your life total higher than you otherwise would, because if you get too low, then a lot of that unblockable damage is just going to kind of run away with the game as soon as they have that tempo and they're snowballing and getting in the extra 2 damage from Rosetta Throne or whatever else it is.
Yeah, and if you're playing with Briar, I might even try to kind of pitch some of my arcane damage early in the game and set it up so that it can, once everybody's at a low life total, it can just kind of come in and finish them off.
Nice.
There's also Earth cards that let you get stuff back from your graveyard, so that's another way to maybe you throw out some arcane damage early, start getting in, and then later in the game you can go get it back and do it again.
Yeah. And so something that I've mentioned a few times now is just tempo. So she does really the theme when I'm looking at players that is just looking for this. And she does such a good job of keeping a steady tempo with her ability to make these tokens. Every time that you do damage, you get one. You're just double triggering off of one if you're attacking, and then it pumps your ability to defend on their turn, and it just kind of builds up. So you probably won't have to use as many resources defending as you otherwise would. And that means that on your turn, you're going to have more resources available to attack, which just makes more of these embodiment of Earth tokens and starts the cycle all over again. And so it should be really cool. I think when a good Briar deck is built in a sealed deck, it's going to just be one of those decks that doesn't care what the other person's doing. They're just going to be powering through and just doing really cool things in a really efficient way. So
in true Runeblade fashion.
Yep.
Shane just kind of does his own thing. The Viserai OTK deck's just like, yeah, I'm just going to make some rune chants over here. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. You've just got a little like abacus on your side where you're like ticking down their health and, and you ask, am I dead yet? And they go, no, not yet. That's next turn. And you just kind
give it a minute.
Yeah. Give it a minute. Well, cool. So, so that's kind of the theme behind Briar and building tempo and what you're looking to do. Let's look at her cards. So no ice in this one. So, we don't get to just stack all of our commons with ice and say, build that. We have to be a little original here. So let's walk me through what you're looking to build and what you can reasonably expect to get out of commons when you're doing sealed with Briar.
Sure. So I think what you'll see here, the theme is arcane damage. So Arcanic Shockwave, Singeing Steel Blade, both deal arcane damage. I'm sorry, these are a little small on my screen, so I'm having trouble reading them all. But in general, you just want to be dealing multiple sources of damage, which is awesome and can trigger a lot of the effects. It'll make, like if Singeing Steel Blade goes unblocked, that's 2 Embodiment of Earth tokens, and then you can basically block their whole turn out with 1 card and then come back in with another 4-card hand of your own. So all of these cards are just good at getting in sort of evasive damage that can't really be dealt with because there's no Spell Void, there's no what was it called, Arcane Barrier.
Yep.
Null Rune stuff.
Rune, yep. Yeah. So the other thing I'm seeing here is that, and something that we haven't really talked about yet, and we'll talk more about, but on the screen here, I'm seeing a whole lot of cards that show Lightning Fusion and Earth Fusion. And so that's going to be a theme that's going to be really important for all the characters here, but is something that I see a lot more common here in Briar. Whereas, again, if you have the cards in hand and you're showing tempo, a lot of these cards are going to be doing just that much extra and keeping you ahead. So keep an eye out for the cards you see here and for the fusion effects that are going to push you over the edge. And so with that, we've covered the 3 heroes. So let's take a step back, and I'd be interested to hear if you have any thoughts for the format as a whole, and things you're going to be thinking about going into to the pre-release events.
Sure. We've talked about this some, but I think this set is really going to feel, pun intended, snowbally. The common cycle of equipment in this set does not block. There are a ton of on-damage effects, some of which you're able to stack up multiple at a time. Every hero has access to evasion. Like we said, Briar has arcane damage, but then Lexi and Oldhim both have pretty good ways to give attacks dominate, which means you can only block with 1 card from hand. Yep. And then the fusion effects in this set really reward you for keeping a lot of cards in hand, because if you have to block out on your turn and you're attacking with 1 card on your turn, you can't fuse. There's no way that you can play something and then you're empty-handed, and so there's nothing to reveal. So if you're able to be coming in with 4-card hands, 5-card hands, you're going to be able to trigger those fuse effects a lot more often, rather than if you're trying to block out and then try to swing back, you're not going to be able to regain that tempo because you're not going to have the cards to reveal for fuse.
Yeah. And so let's actually take a second. We've brought up fuse a few times now, and I just want to make sure that we cover it so people know what they're expecting, and then also or know what the mechanic is and how to use it, and whether or not they can expect to reliably do it on a regular basis. And so Fusion says, and correct me if I'm wrong here, that you play a card and you can show a card with the essence, essentially, of one of the elements in your hand, and you've paid the fuse cost. Is that correct?
Right. It's an additional optional cost that you can do when you're paying for a spell. So you can't use the card that you pitched. You obviously can't use the card that you're playing. So it's kind of, unless it's a cost 0 card, it's a 3-card combo where you have to pitch something to pay for it, and then also be able to pay the additional cost by revealing the card.
Gotcha. And so again, the mental model that I'm taking into this pre-release event is that there are going to be a lot of cards that are good, and that if you also happen to be able to play the fuse or the fusion effect, they're just great, and they're going to push you over the edge, and it's just going to be icing on the cake. And a reasonable expectation for how often you're going to be able to do this, I'm going to assume that I'm going to be able to fuse a card when I play it about half the time, right? Because you've pitched a card, you have put a card down, and you have half your cards left in your hand, and you're going to be able to show the essence or not. And it might be only a Guardian card or only a Ranger card, but sometimes it will be the card that allows you to fuse. So again, about half the time.
And we'll adjust that ratio as we play the format some and kind of get a feel for it. But I think that's a good baseline going in.
Exactly. So when you're building your deck for the sealed event, just remember to look at both essence cards and cards that have the fuse ability, and just to get an idea of how many of those that you have, and that you have enough kind of a good ratio to be able to play both fuse cards and pay for them. So yeah, what else can we look at or think about when we're going into the pre-release event?
Like I said, with the kind of snowbally nature of the format, I would be really surprised if fatigue were a viable strategy, which is good. I honestly don't think that's a very fun way to play.
Yeah.
If you are able to fatigue, I think the Earth cards get a lot better, the Earth Essence cards, because those are just really well equipped to win an attrition fight. There's a card like Evergreen. If it's played from Arsenal, put it on the bottom of your deck when the combat chain closes. So a little bit like Drone of Brutality, which has been banned now. It's conditional. You have to play it from Arsenal, and you can only play it if you're an Earth hero. But other than that, the effect is very similar to Drone of Brutality, and where it just kind of gives you a recursive threat that really lets you win the attrition fights.
Yep.
As far as playing first or second in this format, I mentioned it before, but I think Lexi will probably want to go second all the time because she is actually able to use that first turn to set up her bow and then get to draw back up at the end of her opponent's turn and then play out full hand on her turn.
Yep.
I guess the other two probably have a slight preference for going first because you're able to be the first person to arsenal a card. You can set up a 5-card turn. Briar can maybe get in some arcane damage, so even if you can block her primary attack, there's arcane damage that you can't block regardless of what's in your hand. And then Oldhim has a number of auras that you could potentially get down to start setting up for one of your big turns later. But in general, I would say this Lexi preferring to go second is strong enough that if I were playing the other two heroes, I would make Lexi go first.
Yeah, so she can't start that kind of tempo chain to set up and then just snowball the game.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, cool.
The equipment, I think it's fine. You'll play everything that you open and be happy to have those effects. But I do feel like the fact that none of it blocks arcane damage or regular damage is kind of a step down from the equipment we've seen in the past.
Yeah.
We're talking about pre-releases today, so draft isn't necessarily a big concern, but in the past, I would say it's correct to first pick equipment a lot of the time. And it may not be the most powerful card in your deck, but it will be a card that you can always play and always have access to. And now that's still the case. You'll always play it. You'll always have access to it. But I do feel like it's so weak at this point that some of the other options might be stronger first picks in draft and in sealed. Again, you'll play what you have, but you shouldn't be too excited about it, and you shouldn't necessarily go out of your way to kind of build around your equipment suite. Yeah,
it's not stopping anybody from doing what they want to do, which, again, like we talked about, is just go do damage. So
unless you get one of like the really rare class-specific equipments, like those are still excellent. But
those I would definitely build around. In our previous video for the first two characters, Lexi and Oldhim, we covered a lot of the big cards that, the big bombs that you may or may not pull and build around. So if you want to know more about some of these kind of less common cards that maybe you want to build a deck around and constructed, or just know about on the off chance that you get lucky and pull one during a sealed event, you can check out our previous video. But with that said, do we have anything else before we go get ready for our own pre-release event later on?
Who are you going to try to play tonight?
I don't know, man. I like Briar. I'm going to be honest. I was also a little bummed about the Wizard Runeblade thing, but like you said, with time, I've grown to accept it. It's a Runeblade hero, but very much in their own flavor. And I think what she's looking to do, I just like that you can kind of attack with reckless abandon if things are working out well. She kind of sets herself up well for the defending side, and so I want to see if I can make that work. What about you?
I, for one, welcome our Runeblade overlords.
There you go.
I'd love to play Briar. I'd also love to try out. I mean, I'd be happy to play any of them. I do think Ice is going to be really strong, and I want to start to try to get a feel for how strong.
Absolutely.
Ranger's always a crowd pleaser, so if I can try to get a Lexi deck going, I know it's tricky. I know it may not be the most powerful thing you can be doing, but I'd be interested to see if I can make her work.
Definitely. And we can't count out Oldhim. I mean, nothing's going to feel quite as good as swinging in for 10 and seeing the panic on your opponent's face. With Dominate. And they're just trying to figure out like, oh, I mean, I had 7 life and I'm dead now. So good game, So cool. So again, I mean, it's really exciting. You can't, like I said, you can't count out any of these characters. I think they're all going to do cool things and be successful in their own way. Especially in the pre-release event tonight, which I'm really looking forward to, and for the rest of the weekend. So I guess with that, this has been another episode of Bobbleheads. Again, I'm Michael.
I'm Andy.
And so if you would like, comment, or subscribe, if you've liked this video, let us know in the comments below. If you have constructive criticism, let us know in the chat below. We'd love to hear and learn things along with you as we figure out how this set is going to turn out. And
who you're playing this weekend.
Yeah, no, we'd love to hear if you've got hot takes on the best lightning deck and why we're all missing out on the best way to play these things. We'd love to know. But with that said, we hope you guys have a good time at the pre-release this weekend. I know I'm looking forward to. We're playing multiple events this weekend. We're going to get our fill. And so, and if you've liked this video, we'd love to see you come back. Our next videos coming up are going to be more deep dives on the individual heroes from a limited perspective, so that we can get ready for another event that's coming up, which is going to be the Calling here in Dallas. They had the Calling Las Vegas for the worldwide premiere of Tales of Aria last weekend, which was really exciting, and you can go back and watch on Twitch or Channel Fireball. But again, looking forward, in about a month from October 15th to 17th, the Calling Dallas will be here, and we are definitely going to be at that event. It will be a limited event, but on the kind of Grand Prix Calling level. So we hope to see you there, and hopefully see you at pre-release events this evening. So with that, take care, and we'll talk to you guys next time.
Bye, guys.
Bye.